This is the Hollywood Outsider. This is a special episode where we had the unique opportunity of interviewing Jeremy Snead. Now, if you're not familiar with that name, Jeremy Snead is an up-and-coming director who has this week released his first feature-length film. It's a documentary called Video Games the Movie. We had a chance to talk with Jeremy to ask him about his movie, how he made it, and what it's like to be a gamer, and we wanted to get a chance to share that with you guys. So it's really important for me personally, because you guys all know I'm a gamer, and yes, we're going to talk about games for a little bit, and no one's allowed to smack me. That includes you, Aaron.
It's also technically a movie, so
it is technically a movie.
It wins on both fronts. Well, one thing, Scott, that I want to know is why did this movie work so much for you personally? I mean, I know you wrote a review and it's on the website, so everybody should check that out. But just for the people listening, why does this movie really impact you?
Well, because it's something I've looked for in a video game documentary in a long time. I've looked at other documentaries and I've never gotten the same feeling. I always felt like everything else kind of felt a little flat. Either the game was focusing on one game or focusing on just a single genre, something like that. This one kind of covers the whole history of gaming as well as the gaming culture and what it means to be a gamer. And it really struck home with me and is really wrapped up in a nice little bow, had a good front end, good back end that just really made me feel happy to be a gamer. And I hope a lot of people will check it out. Yeah,
and I want to add to that because I'm a casual gamer at best that I really enjoyed the film, and I thought it does a great job of explaining just how widespread gaming truly is. Mm-hmm. It's no longer just some guy in his basement of his mom's house playing video games, not talking to anybody. You know, there's still people like that, don't get me wrong, but the majority are well-adjusted, respectable businessmen and members of society. So that whole adage of some lonely guy in his mom's basement is gone. It's just not true. He offers some great statistics at the beginning that actually showcases that I really loved.
And it's done in such a fashion that is very easy to follow, very easy to understand. You don't have to be in the middle of the culture to understand what's going on. They do a really good job. So,
absolutely.
All right, well, we don't want to spend too much time us talking. We know you want to get to the interview. Real quick, as always, you can follow us at thehollywoodoutsider.com. We also you can listen to us on iTunes as well as Stitcher. Make sure you give us a thumbs up if you do. Without further ado, here is our interview with Jeremy Snead. We're here with Jeremy Snead, director of the new documentary Video Games the Movie, which releases in theaters on July 18th and on Video On Demand July 15th. Jeremy, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. I just want to get right into some questions right away. This movie obviously is about video games, so can you tell us what it is about gaming that made you feel that this is a story that you really need to tell to your audience?
Sure. Well, the short answer is it was a movie that I wanted to see that didn't exist. You know, about 3.5 years ago, I had taken my nieces and nephews to Dave & Buster's and had dinner, and they were, playing all the shooters and driving games, and I saw this poor little Donkey Kong arcade in the corner that nobody was playing, and kind of got nostalgic for it, went over there and played it, and of course they all one by one came over and, hey, Uncle Jeremy, what is this? And I'd tell them, oh, this is where games first started. And so later that night I was just nostalgic for it, and I thought, I'm going to get on Netflix or Amazon, or iTunes and see if I can find a documentary on video games, because surely it exists, right?
Right, you would think so.
There's a documentary on everything, right? Mm-hmm. But, long story short, I couldn't really find one that I felt like covered all of the peaks and valleys of the subject matter. So the next day I just set out to make an outline, and once I had that, I just started calling people for interviews, and here we are almost 4 years later.
4 years it took to get that all done, huh?
Yeah, from the germ of the idea of the outlining, even before the script, it was almost 4 years. Yeah.
Well, some of our listeners might not be aware, but your film was partially funded through Kickstarter. Now, we've talked about other movies getting made this way, and how much we personally appreciate this as an avenue for quality content. Can you share why you decided to go this route to get funding for Video Games the Movie, and what that process was like for you, especially when you exceeded your own goal?
Sure. Yeah. The first couple of years of principal photography, shooting the interviews and B-roll and on location shoots at game companies and game developers, I sort of funded out of my own pocket, which is somewhat, possible now with digital cinema digital filmmaking and the tools that are out there. But, once it got to the point where I had all the footage, or nearly all the footage I felt like we needed to make a good movie, post-production is a little less forgiving on hard costs.
Mm-hmm.
You have hard costs for the score and for the narrator and for editing and motion graphics. So, I knew that Kickstarter was there. It's a little bit intimidating because there's so much competition and so many projects, but, we did it, and I was blown away by the response of everybody, reaching our goal in like almost 10 days.
That's fantastic. Now, the movie itself feels as though you're aiming for two different audiences, gamers themselves and also those who may know what video games are but have never really touched a controller in their lives. Can you tell us a bit why you decided to go that route?
Sure, yeah. I feel like we all have the same, if not similar, nostalgic feelings about the 8-bit and 16-bit era. Atari, Nintendo, Sega, Sonic, Mega Man, Mario, and then there's this big gap, in sort of the from the late '90s until now of when the quote unquote next generation of games started coming out, from N64 to now Xbox One and PS4. Of people that feel like, I don't know what that is. That's not, what I grew up with, Pac-Man or Nintendo or Mario. That's something else. When in fact, it really is the same. The technology's evolved, and it's become, a more vibrant art form and more interactive. But I really wanted to bridge that gap, to make a film that people could come in at whatever age they're at. If they're young, maybe get an education on classic games and where games came from. But if you're on the other side, if you're a little bit older, you can be nostalgic about the games you grew up with, but then see that connection of game designers and the industry and the vibrant community of gamers now that have brought the medium from those primitive days to where it is now.
Was part of that because you were tired of that old mantra that gamers are only guys that sit around in their mom's basement playing video games? Yeah, that's one that anyone that's a gamer is just, you get nauseated by because you've heard it so many times.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love the facts at the beginning of the movie because that was so well done. I mean, everything you said, you just hammered the point. Hey, guess what? This is not gaming 20 years ago.
Yeah, that whole section of sort of the statistics of who gamers are and where they live and what the average gamer looks like. I really wanted to focus on that early on in the movie to say, okay, let's lay the groundwork of what this medium is and who it affects now, and then we'll get into the story.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people don't even realize how large the industry is, or at least a layperson does. Now, moving on with some more content from the film, you were able to get interviews with a lot of big names in the industry. We know Cliff Bleszinski was a producer, but what was your process for getting other industry legends like Hideo Kojima, Reggie Fils-Aimé, and Nolan Bushnell?
Sure. The short answer is it's sort of a snowball. I started out with the contacts that I had at some of the bigger publishers like Activision and Capcom, and once I got a handful of legitimate industry people on film, it was a little bit easier to then kind of snowball that into getting, Gearbox and Epic Games, and Nolan Bushnell was a later one. I think once he saw that we were legitimate and had most of the industry represented, he came on board. So very similar to Hideo Kojima and Mark Cerny and a lot of the people that we got kind of at the 11th hour. And that, I will say as a side note, the Kickstarter, it did as much for us in publicity as it did for, giving us resources to finish the film.
Gotcha. Now, one of the things I did notice in the film that there was very little mention of PC gaming. Now, me personally, as a console gamer, it didn't bother me, but can you tell me why you decided to focus primarily on console gaming instead of the full gamut there?
Yeah, it's tough because we do have a small section on it that we talk about some of the innovators there, but it's like a lot of the other topics. or genres and subgenres in gaming that it's just really difficult to get into a 90-minute film.
Sure.
And PC gaming, as you know, is almost an entire. It's not a different industry, but it's definitely a subset of sort of games that you can buy at Walmart and Target, if that makes sense.
Right. Exactly.
You can still get those games on PC, but then the audience is so much deeper and wider. I feel like they know those games and they know that they're represented in console as well as PC. So it was tough, is the short answer.
Now, in the film, you use the really wonderful analogy of the campfire to explain what it's like to be a gamer. Can you talk about that for a moment and share your inspiration for that idea?
Oh, yeah. I love that you asked that question. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, and, I've heard the stories of George Lucas being inspired by him for the story of Star Wars, and basically that I just love the idea that storytelling really hasn't changed since the Dark Ages, since the dawn of man. It's just telling a story, whether it be around a campfire or that's coming from the pages of a book or from a screen that you're sitting in front of in a dark room, or by holding a controller and being a part of the story. I just love that concept of mythology and how far we've come as storytellers, that, it used to be that whoever's the best person to tell the story around the campfire is the one that's going to be telling it. And now the campfire storytellers are filmmakers, are game designers, and it's just exciting to look ahead, even in the next 20 years, to see, what's that campfire going to look like for games and films, for that matter. It's hard to get your mind around, but it's exciting to think about as a filmmaker.
Hey, Jeremy, I want to ask you. During the movie, you've got creative minds from the gaming industry. You've got celebrities that enjoy gaming, and then you've got like real fans that really, true gamers themselves. So, I mean, you've got a nice caveat of a different mesh of personalities. How do each one of those, infuse the movie you ended up making? Did they bring a little bit of different information each section?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of the fans being a part of the film is, the age-old question. If you're a gamer or a game historian, there's always this debate of who's the father of gaming. Is it Nolan Bushnell? Is it Ralph Baer? Is it Hideo Kojima? Is it Miyamoto? Some people say that, the games really started with Nintendo after the crash. So I love that we have fans answering that question, because the reality is there's really no right answer, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, that was a good example of letting the fans give their cross-section of answers. And then industry people, we tried to really focus on, in the section where we talk about game development and game design, we tried to really rely heavily on some of the more prominent game designers during that section. But, throughout the film, having celebrities, people that aren't game designers per se, but are gamers and also happen to be a public persona, having them in the film, I think, makes it a little bit easier entry to just the average Joe that doesn't know who Hideo Kojima is.
Exactly.
If that makes sense.
No, there's a lot of people that have no idea who these guys are, and I think your movie does a very nice job of illustrating to the common man, I would say, exactly what goes on behind the closed doors.
One of the things that stuck out to me so much was the amount of content you were able to pack into this movie. There was probably over 100 different video captures of different video games, and I got to wonder how difficult it was to be able to get that in a feature-length film. Did you have to get permission for each game's appearance?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, we had the industry behind us. Once we got to the point that we started editing, we had a really great publicity with the Kickstarter, and so the industry was really supportive. Some of the stuff is we rely on the fair use doctrine if the company doesn't exist anymore. but it's sort of you use the old cliche, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That was kind of how that worked.
That's a really cool story. So what's next for Jeremy Snead?
Well, I have a handful of projects that are in development right now. Nothing that I can give a title to, but there is a sort of a TBD project with Sean Astin that we're talking about and developing, and a couple of others, related to video games that are also in development, untitled, but hopefully you'll be seeing those in the next 6 months.
Looking forward to it. All right, before we let you go, Jeremy, I do want to say something that I've never said to anybody before, and I mean this with the utmost sincerity. Thank you for making this film. It pretty much was exactly what I wanted from a documentary about video games, and it is probably only the second time in my life I felt moved by a documentary. The closing credits were just touching, for lack of a better word. I really feel like you've given me a tool to explain to those around me that don't play games why I like being a gamer, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. It does. I'm so glad that you like the film, and just makes it worth it just hearing that. I really appreciate that.
Oh, so glad to hear.
And good luck on the release. We got to let you go because I know you got other interviews, so take care.
And thanks for taking the time, man.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Well, that was our interview. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I do want you guys to know at the end I did get a little give him some high praise there. But
seriously, all you were missing was like a high five.
Yeah, pretty much. But that was completely sincere. Everything I said was absolutely true. I adore this movie, and I hope a lot of people will give it a fair shake.
I hope your wife finally sees it because maybe she'll finally understand what is wrong with you. I mean, what is right with you.
I hope all the girls that I went to high school with see
That's probably not going to happen. Not at all. But it is. I highly recommend it. Scott highly recommends it. That's 2 for 2.
Absolutely.
Really. And where can they find us, Scott?
They can find us at thehollywoodoutsider.com. You can listen to our weekly show on iTunes as well as on your Stitcher Radio app.
Every Thursday, new episode.
Every Thursday. And we do have a Twitter handle as well, which is at @H_outsider. And remember, guys, the next time you go to a theater, which we assume you're going to see Video Games the Movie,
Better be.
buy popcorn.